Chief Hadley, I want to thank you for joining us today.
Sure.
I want to get right into this latest gun violence incident for Chatham County. That was Sunday night at 11 o'clock. From what I understand, you all are still looking for a suspect in this incident. Can you tell us what you know about this shooting, and are there any leads on a suspect at this point?
At this point, we had a debriefing this morning. We do not have any leads as of this interview. We continue to canvass the area, ask people who may have knowledge of it to give us a call to lead us in the right direction. The victim in this case is still in critical condition, still at the hospital, and hopefully he'll pull through. But as of this point, we have very limited information relative to the incident, which is unfortunate.
Do we believe this was someone who knew the victim, or was this more random?
I don't know. I can't answer that. I wish I had more information. My prediction is it's someone that more than likely knows the individual. That's what we often find in these incidents. What we do know is that the victim apparently left his house or went outside to smoke a cigarette, and that's when this incident occurred. So, generally speaking, in these type of incidents, are very rarely random. That there's usually some backstory to why this interaction took place or the shooting took place. So, but as of yet, we don't have any confirmation whether or not it was random and or a interpersonal conflict.
So, Chief, speaking about gun violence in Savannah, of course, the police department is dealing with what seems like an epidemic of gun violence in neighborhoods and streets. I know that Chatham County is not seeing the level of gun violence that SPD is seeing, but it is spilling over into Chatham County at times. We often hear what you just said, that these are people who know each other. So how are you policing gun violence in Chatham County with your officers out on the streets?
Well, certainly if we have information and we can get ahead of some type of incident, we're certainly going to do that, share intelligence, things of that nature. But let me just be quite honest with you. It's very difficult for the police to be, anywhere and everywhere. Number one, I've often said we get entirely too much credit when crime goes down, and we get entirely too much blame when crime goes up. And I don't say that flippantly. All I'm saying is it's a very complex issue that we have to try to contend with. There's a myriad of factors that may go into gun violence spiking. I think if you look at it from a historical perspective, numbers today are much less than they were in, let's say, 1991. If you look at FBI UCR crime data, for example, like in 1991, aggregately 9.8 homicides per 100,000 on average in the United States. Today, or in 2020, it was about 6.5. So, when you look at it from a historical perspective, we're experiencing much less crime today, much less homicide crime today than we did in 1991. That's not to diminish the fact that we're still experiencing it or to, explain away anything. But I do think it's important to look at it from a contextual standpoint. We have much better technology today. We have much better resources today to address some of the situations that we have.
I was looking at your crime report for the week ending last week on the 19th. And I'm looking at domestic gun versus non-domestic gun aggravated assaults. The non-domestic is higher than the domestic. And we talk about this in my family. Are we seeing more gang activity? Would you attribute some of this to gang activity? Is this just conflicts between people that they're resulting to using or pulling a gun? What are we seeing?
I think there's an element of, well, the two points that you made. I think there's an element of both. Certainly there's gang involvement, with relative to gunplay and people that are shooters, as I like to call them, that have no problem and no reservation about pulling a handgun and using it to resolve a conflict or settle a beef or whatever the case may be. One data set of note, at least in our statistics, that stuck out to me when you're looking from 2019 to 2021 for us in terms of pointing firearms at someone else. We had 18 of those in 2019, and it went up to 47 in 2021. So that's someone who will pull a weapon, and whether it be an effort to intimidate somebody and or an effort to resolve some type of conflict. That can go bad in so many ways, as we know. And that's a data set that really kind of stuck out to me, that it seems to me that people have no reservation about pulling a firearm just to either brandish it, intimidate someone, or resolve a conflict. And that's truly unfortunate. That's just no way to behave.
I was looking at that same data you were referring to, and, violent crimes increased by almost 40%, primarily due to aggravated assaults. Do you think that we're seeing an uptick because, we're sort of coming out of the pandemic? We're still in the pandemic, but people are out roaming around now more than they were during the pandemic. Do you think that's having an impact?
I think it's certainly a discussion point. I think, yeah, obviously with people on lockdown previously, and certainly in 2020, not really able to go places, you're going to have less human interaction, and you're going to have less of those incidents take place. And then as America starts opening up and people are more free to roam and go, to restaurants or go out and do whatever they want to do, they're going to have more contact with folks, and which causes rise to more interpersonal conflict potentially. So I do think that's an element of it. I think there's also other factors that play in that the police really are unable to get their arms around. And it's a community problem. And I would like to say, in support of Savannah, I think they're doing everything that they can do to try to, wrestle with the violent crime that affects the city. And I think Chief Mitchell is doing a fantastic job. I think it's also of note when you look at police staffing, all of us suffer from a reduction. And when I say reduction, that we're unable to fill our vacancies that we have. We're about 25% down from what we're budgeted for. I think the city of Savannah is relatively in the same percentage range. That doesn't allow you to be proactive from a law enforcement perspective. It doesn't allow you to be problem solvers. What it does do is it kind of renders you to be reactive, and you're really just responding to the events that take place. And that's really not a position that any law enforcement agency wants to be in. So how do we attract the talent that we need to do a very, very difficult job in today's society? How do we retain the good people that we have? Who are overworked sometimes, who can't get days off because we can't allow them to take days off because we need them to go respond to calls for service. So that's all part of the conversation that I think needs to be had, not only at the local level, but certainly at the national level.
Well, and at the local level in Savannah, there's been a lot of talk about, are we paying the officers enough to get them to want to stay, to get them to sign on in the first place? Is that something you all are facing at CCPD? Do you need help from the county to pay more? Are you trying to get officers paid more?
We are trying. Let me first say the county has been tremendously supportive of the Chatham County Police Department. So let me just say that they have done everything they said they're going to do. So I truly appreciate Chairman Ellis, county management, and the commissioners themselves. They have been tremendously supportive. However, as things evolve, when you can go to, let me give you an example. We lost a fine young lady officer here in the last 2 weeks who went to Walmart to be an assistant manager. And good for Walmart because they got a fantastic lady. And so we were really sad to see her leave. So that's just kind of an anecdotal example of what we contend with in law enforcement in terms of retaining talent. We know we can't pay him $1 million. We all know that it's public money. There isn't enough of it. But I do think that hard conversations need to be had. Is what's the investment in public safety that we see right now that needs to be done in order to stabilize the workforce, number one, and as we go forward, be able to come up to relatively full staffing so we can get ahead of some of these problems.
Chief, I want to talk about the officers who we do have who are out on the streets. A couple of years ago, we talked to you about some training you were doing about sensitivity and diversity. Is that still ongoing with the force
It
right now?
is. It is, sir. So every new hire that comes in on the department, we not only do we have fair and impartial policing trainers on staff that contends with implicit bias. We also have EPIC, which is ethical policing is courageous. It talks about duty to intervene. It talks about your how you be a 21st century police officer in today's day and age. So we still have many of those or those programs still in place and embedded in our hiring program and in our training practices. One thing we haven't been able to do because of the pandemic, what we used to do, and we will do once it opens back up, we would always go to the Gilbert Museum downtown, have a presentation by Miss Green, the staff down there, also tour the museum. I think that's very important. One of the more powerful images in that at the museum is the gentleman at the lunch counter. Have you been there?
No, I've never been there.
You need to go.
Okay.
And so one of the static displays is an African-American gentleman sitting at a lunch counter in the 1950s. And it has a waitress standing there kind of with her arms folded with, a kind of discerning look on her face. And then it has a police officer in back of the person. So if you think of that image, from that time, day and time in American history, obviously, what to me, we've come such a long way from that. And where law enforcement were agents of those unfair practices and unfair laws in American history. But I wanted my officers to see that and understand what an important role they play in American society, in this community, because all politics are local, right? And that how they behave and how they conduct themselves is so viably important, not only to themselves, to the community, but the nation as a whole, because we can turn on a dime at any time with bad behavior of an officer. So from a contextual standpoint, I wanted them to understand that that's their role in American society is critically important.
All right, Chief, thank you so much for joining us here on First News at 4. We appreciate it. It's always good to talk with you. And certainly we want to have you back on and have some more discussions about what we're seeing in the streets of Chatham County. Thank you so much.
Anytime. Thank you very much.